So in this lecture, we're going to talk for a moment about population size and dynamics. So in order to understand a population, you have to kind of know some stuff about how many individuals exist within it. So for instance, if you were trying to study a population of humans, it would be a huge difference if you were looking at, say, 20 people in a given area as opposed to 100,000 people in a given area. So in order to understand these populations, you need to be able to count them. And there are oftentimes no way to directly count things. And so there are many different techniques that ecologists can use to estimate size. So, for instance, if it's like a large species like elephants or like humans or seals, you can just kind of look and go and count those individuals. But if it's an organism, for instance, that exists over thousands and thousands of miles potentially, what you can do is count a representative area or count an area that you think is going to look somewhat like the other regions in which that organism lives, and then you can extrapolate the data from that if you can't count them directly. So this is kind of going into the models that represent population growth, and we have arithmetic and exponential growth. So an arithmetic increase occurs when over a given interval of time an unvarying number of new units is added to a population. And this should make a bit more sense when we actually look at the picture. An exponential growth increase or an exponential increase occurs when a number of new units added is proportional to the number of units that exists. So these sort of mathy, wordy definitions, I think it's best to just kind of look at a picture. So here you have arithmetic growth here, and you're just slowly increasing the number. And the example it uses is car production. Here's exponential growth, where you can see this number is just increasing quite rapidly as the number of days increases. So here's exponential growth. It's just sort of exploding off the page here. So the rapid growth that sometimes characterizes living populations is sometimes called a J-shaped growth curve. I'm not as interested in that. I just kind of want you guys to know an exponential growth curve looks like an explosion. Just things are rapidly, I'll go back to this, things are just rapidly increasing in size, whereas arithmetic, it's very slow, it's limited. So populations that grow but level out, which is kind of a more realistic model, these are referred to as logistic growth curves. There's sometimes called S growth curves. But here's what a logistic growth curve looks like here. It's starting to look like it might be exponential, but then it levels out toward this level K, and we'll talk about this level K. So here's an exponential growth curve, just exploding off the page, nothing stopping it. Here's your logistic growth curve. It's starting to grow quickly, then it's leveling out. And then here are more complex growth curves. These are more like what a real life population is going to experience. Some increase, some decrease, but they're all leveling out right around this number K. And we're going to talk about K here in just a second. So the size of living populations is kept in check by environmental resistance, defined as all the forces of the environment that act to limit population growth. So this could be things like a lack of food, this could be things like a lack of space, this could be things like predation. If you get too many individuals, you start getting eaten. And there was this writer named Malthus who strongly influenced Darwin, who talked about these limits to population growth. So exponential growth in living populations is calculated by subtracting the death rate from the birth rate. This is also called R. I'm not going to make you guys do anything crazy mathy with this. If I ask you a question about this, I'll give you the equation. Okay, and this is also known as R is also called the population's intrinsic rate of increase. So if you have a high R, you can see you're growing quite rapidly. If you have a low R, you're still growing, but not quite as fast. Zero R, you're just straight across. No growth, no births, no deaths. Nothing is happening to your population. And if you have a negative R, you have more deaths than births, and your population is declining. So this is kind of relative to like the amount of time between generations, and it's relating body size or correlating body size to the amount of time between generations. And as you can see here, the smallest of the small, the E. coli have a very, very tiny body, but they also have a very, very rapid generational time. That's why you can put a bacterial plate in an incubator and come back a couple of days later and have hundreds of millions of copies. So as you work your way up and you continue on the size spectrum, generation time gets longer and longer until you get out here to whales, which have a very long generation time and also a very large body length or body size. Same thing with elephants. Humans are actually pretty big as well, and we have a fairly large generational time to go along with that size. So K, as I was talking about earlier, or this idea of carrying capacity, this is the rough density of individuals that a population can sustain. What I mean by that is you cannot have, let's say there's only resources for 5 people in a given area. You're probably never going to have very many more than 5 people. And you saw hopefully with that complex, I'll go back to it, this complex model, that population size tends to vary around K. It's not like this logistic thing in reality most of the time. It's not just going to go to K and stay there. It's going to sort of oscillate around this K value. So carrying capacity K, maximum population density of a given species that can be sustained within a defined geographical area over an extended period of time, which is absolute word soup. I just want you to know that carrying capacity is the most amount of things that can live in a particular spot, in a particular region. So next, we're going to talk about R-selected and K-selected species in the context of population growth.